Welcome, everyone. On today's podcast, I have the amazing Eve Rodsky. She is the New York Times bestselling author of Fair Play. It is a life-changing book. What Eve is trying to do is help people understand the amount of time that women spend shouldering the responsibility of child rearing and domestic life responsibilities, regardless of whether they are working outside the home. Reese Witherspoon is a big fan. In fact, her company Hello Sunshine is a partner with Eve in Fair Play, and there are many things going on. We talk about that in the podcast, and I am excited for you to hear this. What Eve talks about might really challenge your beliefs, but it could also change your life. So we're going to jump right into it, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. So Eve, thank you so much for being on the show today.
I'm so happy to be with you. We were getting to catch up a little bit before, so I'm really happy to have this conversation.
Well, let's start with the fact that your book, which is New York Times bestseller, Fair Play, it was published in 2018, 2019?
2019.
And it was published in 2019 pre-pandemic, right? So not, and all about the idea that men and women need to rethink how the workload in the home is kind of balanced in this day and age. Do you have any anticipation that we would get into this pandemic and the importance of your book would be even greater given what's going on right now?
Well, it's so funny you say that because people used to ask me on the road. I was on a 5-month book tour where my husband held all the cards. And we'll talk more about what that metaphor means from somebody who couldn't even find my son's pants before that. But I will say that on that book tour, people would always ask me, what would be my wish if I was, a genie and I could wish something for systemic change in this country. And I'd always say, it starts with the invisible becoming visible. I wish there was a way for society to see in a real palpable way all the invisible work that women do. And so in a lot of ways, my wish came true in a horrific pandemic. But ironically, the invisible has never been more visible. We are living our lives out on Zoom. So we're everything that may have been more behind the scenes, where people and employers and government were more reticent to talk about the importance of support and a social safety net in the home. Now I don't think we actually have any choice. I think it's become an economic issue. It's become an emergency. So I would never wish a pandemic on anybody, but I will say that in terms of this issue of women doing 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, and how unsustainable that is for specifically women, but also for society, I guess a pandemic is the way to go.
Yeah. Well, so let's take a step back and talk about what inspired the book to begin with. So you are a lawyer by trade, right? You're a Harvard educated lawyer.
Yes.
You were presumably not focused in this area. How did you decide? How did it come about? What prompted the writing of this book?
Well, I will say that I definitely did not expect to become an expert on the gender division of labor. I've always worked in organizational management and law and mediation, places where lots of men are. I definitely did not think I would be a gender justice advocate, which is sort of what I call myself now. But it started with, as I write in Fair Play, just a basic, simple day that so many of us can relate to, where my husband sent me a text that said, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." And I remember this day, you can help me picture it. I had a breast pump and a diaper bag on the passenger seat of my car. I had gifts for a newborn baby to return in the back seat of my car. I just had my second son, Ben. I was in the car because I was racing to get to my older son, Zach's toddler transition program. to pick him up because, in America, right, those types of programs, they value working parents, right? So they last like, I don't know, 4 minutes, 6 minutes. So I was racing back to pick him up. I had opted out of the traditional workforce, and I put opted out in quotes because now language really matters. But I like to say like the real language is being forced out. So I was forced out of the corporate workforce. So I started my own firm. I had a client contract in my lap. I had a pen that was stabbing me in the vagina every time I would hit the stop sign, racing to get him, to get Zach. This is sort of the chaos that was happening around me when my husband decided to send me a text saying, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." That day I pulled over. I started crying. And I think what I was really thinking that day was my marriage is going to end over off-season blueberries. I mean, I think that was sort of what my marriage should end over like, a fight in the Caribbean. But I think really what I was thinking that day was, this is not the career marriage combo I thought I was going to have. And more importantly, how did I become the default? I call in fair play the she fault, right? For every single household and domestic task for my family. This was not supposed to happen to me. And I will say 2 privileges where it shouldn't have happened to me. One, I'm a product of a single mom. And so psychologists would call me a parental child. So that meant I was my mother's partner. Starting at 7, 8, I would help her with late utility bills, eviction notices. I vowed that I didn't want to do that I wanted to have an equal partner in life. And then more importantly, I'm a Harvard trained mediator. So I'm literally trained to use my voice. I'm trained to teach people how to communicate. So I guess I figured I was sobbing on the side of the road over this horrific overwhelm, and the fact that my life didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. That probably other women were feeling the same way.
Right.
And that was it. That was the quest. That was the question I was asking. Like, what was happening to me? That was the question I asked myself 9 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you say that because when I had I used to work at American Express. I was there for years, loved it, great company to work for. My husband and I actually met there, went to Columbia Business School together, very very equal-minded in terms of, how we were going to have division of labor. But I remember one of my mentors at the company said to me when I was pregnant with my first child, she said, "I don't care how open-minded you think your husband is. Once you have that baby, it is all about the mom, especially if you're going to breastfeed. Like there are things that, and it's set up almost from the beginning, right? In those environments. And I was working full time, but doing all this stuff, and things start to just very naturally almost flow to it's on the mom. You did a little bit of an assessment of the amount of time that women spend doing some of these activities, scheduling play dates, doing like house stuff around the house. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Lisa, I think that's exactly right. I think I like to say now, somehow we got into a cultural conversation about the life-changing magic of organizing our freaking junk drawers. Where I think the life-changing magic and what I will say till the day I die, because this has become, my rallying cry for other women. I never want anybody to do what I did, or what you did, right? I don't want anybody to go into this thinking that it's their problem, because it's not, right? This is a societal problem. We're not here, as my friend Michelle King says, to fix women. We're here to fix the workplace. We're here to fix society, because it is unsustainable that women do $10.9 trillion of unpaid labor a year. That's the statistic. Women do $10.9 trillion. That's a bigger GDP, I think, than China, right? I mean, I don't know. I have to look it up, but it's been designed that way. And so that's why I don't want I'm here to tell people it's not their problem. Everybody starts out like you and me, Eliza. They start out thinking that the world is fair, because it is fair. It's pretty fair in academics. You feel like you can do well as a woman. You can be valedictorian of your class. I was number 1 in my class in Michigan. I was cum laude at Harvard. And then you enter these environments like workplaces or midlife, and then all of a sudden all these barriers come into your way, right? To the point where And I think that it was so interesting because a lot of people talk about this in the workplace, but I was obsessed with the home because this is one day I went with women just like you. I was on this breast cancer march, and I remember it was right after my my blueberries breakdown over being the fulfiller of Seth. Assuming that Seth thought I was the fulfiller of his smoothie needs on top of everything else. But it was this day where I was at this breast cancer march. My friend Lori had died. May she rest in peace. She died of breast cancer, and my friends were coming with me to honor her. We're all in pink. We were carrying signs that said "Not just a female problem." We had this girlfriend's getaway vibe. It was a Saturday morning, and then it was the reverse Cinderella. Literally noon came. Right, I remember it was noon. And all of a sudden, we're all looking down and our phones are blowing up and people are on the phone and walking away. And I'm like, what is going on here? And really, it was from our partners saying things like, where'd you put Hudson's soccer bag? Mm-hmm. Or what's the address of the birthday party? And why didn't you leave me a gift? Mm-hmm. My favorite was my friend Kate's husband. Do the kids need to eat lunch? Great. This is powerful women, Lisa. These are you. These are the heads of American Express teams. These are Oscar-winning producers. I had the head of stroke and trauma from Cedars-Sinai with me. I mean, these are powerful women, and they were losing their voice, right? Because this is the thing. They didn't all say like, fuck you, I'm not coming home. What they said was, Eve, thank you for the dim sum reservation in downtown LA, but we're not going to come because we left our partners with too much to do. And they ran off. And I said, look, hold up. If you're not going to come with me to lunch, because I was one step ahead of them because I'd already had my blueberries breakdown. I said, look, if you're not going to come with me to lunch, then I had an act of resistance that day. And my act of resistance, I said, was you have to help me count up the phone calls and texts we received before you leave. So I was sort of looking through everybody's phones, and we had 30 phone calls and 46 texts for 10 women over 30 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So that's it. That's it. That was the day that I realized that this was not a me problem. And I started to understand that at the end of the day, what this is it's the core finding of fair play was that while it presents really small and dangerous, like you may be divorcing over blueberries, or as this man in White Plains told me, he divorced over a glue stick. The home is dangerous because it presents small. But I think what I realized that day, this was all about how we view women's time.
Yeah.
We treat women's time in our society as infinite, like it's sand, and we guard men's time like it's diamonds. And that was the core finding of fair play.
Yeah. Yeah. And you took a very unique approach to this, right? What I have heard my entire career is that all of this stuff is stuff that you need to work through at the workplace. But you have a different approach in terms of how you think about how people can really deal with this and build a better solution. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. After now studying this for almost a decade, I don't believe anything is going to change in the workplace until we address the home. This is the last frontier of feminism. And ironically, it's the closest place to us, and it all relies on men. And it is ultimately what I believe to my core is that for women to step into their full power in the workplace, we need to invite men to step into their full power in the home. And that started with me and Seth. And we had a lot of, you're also from the East Coast, so you may remember that weird commercial. It was this like creepy dude who said, like, I'm not just the hair club for men president, I'm the first client. And he would take off, he would show his like hair. That was how I felt. I felt like I was going to be the hair club for men first client, where I would try to really understand what was happening to me. So of course I did what every woman would do first, which is I made a list, because that's what I heard. The only advice I heard was make lists, and I was annoyed by making this list because I kept saying, like, why am I the one having to make this stupid list? But I did it. I opened up an Excel spreadsheet called the Should I Do, and I started populating it with women like you, all the women who went with me on the breast cancer march. And I started to ask them, what is it that you do that may be invisible to your partner. Because when I started to read all the articles that called this the second shift or the mental load, because surprise, we've been talking about this for about 100 years, since Virginia Woolf said women can never be Shakespeare because we don't have an unencumbered mind. My favorite term was a 1986 term by a sociologist named Arlene Kaplan Daniels, and she called this invisible work, arguing that because women do it, it will never be valued. It'll always be invisible. No, there's no incentive to make it visible. So that was my dream, was to make this visible. I did, Eliza. I became a 98 tab spreadsheet of 2,000 items of invisible work, called the Should I Do. And like I said to you, it had everything from, organizing play dates to making school lunches, 10 minutes, that would take 10 minutes, to organizing play dates, maybe an hour, to attending dental appointments, that would be an hour. But what was funny was women I didn't even know started to receive the spreadsheet and say to me, wow, I got your Excel sheet from my friend, and I just wanted to let you know you forgot sunscreen. And I'd say, no, you didn't go to you have to go to the medical and healthy living tab. And if you go to medical and healthy living and you scroll down to item number 22, you'll see sunscreen there. And then she would say, oh yeah, there it is, thanks. Well, there it says 10 minutes. So I think you should put 10 minutes for the application, but 30 minutes for the chase. And then I read, okay, 30 minutes for the chase. It was a really fun, or another woman said to me, like, you don't have Elf on the Shelf. And I said, okay, well, I'm a Jew, I had Santa. I didn't realize I had to add Elf on the Shelf. Okay, so here, under Magical Beings tab, that would be like tab number, 97, Magical Beings. I would have Lucky Leprechaun and Santa and Hanukkah Harry, and then, with an elf on the Shelf, right? So it was that granular. One day I sent it off to Seth, with all my mediation experience, right? Or not, like the opposite, with no context, just a subject line of this 19 million megabyte spreadsheet. Can't wait to discuss, after 9 months of work. And I think that was the day. It was a very important day for me, because I realized when Seth sent me back, not the response I thought I would get. I guess I was expecting, like, wow, Eve, what is this? And how do we unpack this amazing project you embarked on? All I got from Seth was that one monkey emoji, that sad monkey that's covering its eyes, not even the three monkey trio, just like the casino evil emoji. But I think that was the most important day of the project, because I realized that lists alone don't work. They just don't. Right. If you're going to make a list, that means the reminding is still on you. It means someone's going to say to you one day, wear Hudson soccer bag. And so that was a day where I realized, like, I had two choices, right? I could resign myself to doing it all, because I made the best Excel spreadsheet you could ever imagine, and become a gray version of myself and resent my life. Or I could get my ass in gear and become my own client. And so that's when I started to ask, what would happen if you started to treat your home as your most important organization? And that's ultimately what the Fair Play system is. It's a system. It's not a list. It's a system that's based on a 100-card metaphor, to say that when you hold a card of the 100 cards in your household, you're going to hold that card with full ownership. Yeah, your new work fire alarm. Yes,
my fire alarm is going off. What it means is one of my kids has forgotten that they put in the oven.
And that's our metaphor, right? The metaphor for this is that we cannot get an unencumbered mind, because our fucking houses are going to burn down.
That's it.
That's it. And we don't want them to burn down. So that's why I think it was so hard. It was a hard process to understand how to unpack this and get people to start living in a system. And I think that was the beauty of this project, is people are scared of systems. They're worried that it's going to take too long, or that they're going to have to change their whole life. But I look at it like Noom or Weight Watchers, right? Or anything, or like a Fitbit, right? It's a practice, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And the one step for me and Seth was extracurricular sports. I was looking at all the fair play cards at that time. I'd put them into a card game because I wanted to sort of gamify this. And I was holding all the cards. I like that metaphor. I was metaphorically holding all the cards. Now it's not a metaphor because I actually built the cards. We actually have physical cards you can hold and play. But at that time, it was metaphorical cards. And I said to him, I need you to hold one card. We're gonna, we're gonna treat our home as our most important organization. We'll start small. Yes, it was on me to change our system. Hopefully, I've helped couples enough that so many men are now reading Fair Play that there will be men who say, I want to also enter this system. But it started with me as a woman saying, yes, I'm the oppressed here in this gender division of labor, and I have to change it. I'm the game changer. And so what the system is based on is, like I said, ownership. So what do I mean by that? I'll just break that down easily, Aliza, because everybody has a condiment in their refrigerator. And I think it's easy to understand that. My first question as a researcher in this subject area was, how did mustard get into your refrigerator? But what would happen was it would break down very similar to the workplace. There was always a conception step, right? There was always my second son, Johnny, likes mustard for his, lunches that he makes himself. And so I buy mustard, right? So that would be the conception. And then there would be the planning stage where someone would say to me, usually the woman in a hetero cisgender relationship, then I monitor that mustard for when it's running low. And I put it on a grocery list. I get stakeholder buy-in from my team for whatever else they need. And I put that on a grocery list. And so I was like, I know that step. That's planning. And then somebody had to get their butt to the store to go purchase the yellow mustard. And that would be the execution.
Yep.
So I knew the conception, planning, execution was working for the home just as it was for the workplace. But what I was noticing was that men in the home were stepping in at the execution phase in hetero cisgender relationships. Mm-hmm. And they're bringing home spicy Dijon every freaking time. And I asked you for French's yellow mustard, right? I asked you for French's yellow. That's what Johnny eats. And are you blind? Are you not watching? Have you not been sitting at the table for 7 years when he makes a damn sandwich every day? And so all of a sudden, I noticed that we weren't talking about mustard anymore, right? We weren't talking about spicy Dijon versus yellow. We were talking about accountability and trust. And then so many women would say to me, Eve, you want me to trust my husband with my living will? The dude can't even bring home the right type of mustard. And so that was it. I realized it was a systems breakdown.
Yep.
And if we could start to keep the conception, planning, and execution together and get some of the cognitive labor, the mental load off of women,
yep,
we wouldn't be perfect, but we'd be better.
Yeah.
That was it. So that was extracurricular sports for me. It was saying to Seth, I appreciate you getting to the Little League field and that you think you own extracurricular sports. But here's the conception. I survey my kids and their friends to see what leagues they're playing in and what days and where do they want to play. And here's the planning. The planning is that I go on Amazon and I order their supplies, or I ask friends to lend us things. I find my kids' birth certificates and I Xerox 5 copies. I log on to some damn portal that always kicks me out because I don't know the freaking password. I print out 5 consent forms. I'm on a 52-person text chain about my kids' carpools and who's going to take them to practice. I'm somehow in charge of a damn coach's gift, and I have to go get some engraved trophy in the middle of a strip mall that I can't even find. And when you can take that over, Seth, you will give me 10 hours of my week back from just holding that one card with full conception, planning, and execution.
Yep.
And that's how our life started changing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, when you talk about this idea that women aren't able, like when you talked about that quote earlier about how a woman couldn't be Shakespeare because we basically don't have enough, like we don't have enough capacity to really be able to think in that way because we have all these other things we have to think about. I always refer to it as share of mind, right? Like what do I have to spend my time thinking about? And I always talk about it as, okay, we talk to the team about it. I talk to my husband about this, like, what is making up my share of mind at any given time? Because when you cannot do 1,200 things. And yes, women, I think, can do more things than men at the same time. I think we are maybe better.
No, we're not. We're not. I'll talk to you about that. We are not better. Actually, we're worse.
Tell me. I always assume women were better at multitasking.
No. So that was actually really interesting to me, because that was something that I needed to unpack, right? I needed to unpack because so many men would say to me, well, you're better multitaskers. And I would be like, are we? Because I want to understand this. And I will say that was fascinating, because let me tell you what happened. What happened during my research was, and it's why I decided to write to women, was, yes, we know that women's time is, as you just said, we have no share of mind, because somehow people think our time is infinite, but it's actually not, right? It's actually not. And so if I'm spending 10 hours of my week, figuring out how to carpool my kids to sports, I'm not going to have that 10 hours a week to have a share of mind for things I care about. But I think what was so hard for me, why I decided to write to women, was this idea of what I call toxic time messages. Mm-hmm. It was women that were devaluing their own time. Mm-hmm. Even, yes, men, of course, were too, but I had to start with women, because the things I started to hear were when I asked women, why are you the ones picking up the call from your kid's school? Why? Mm-hmm. Why? They're calling you in the middle of the workday. Your share of mind, your flow state is being interrupted. Why are you picking up that call? So many women would say to me, well, my husband makes more money than me. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a terrible argument, because even in the same job, because of pay equity, women make less. Mm-hmm. So I chose philanthropy. I'm more trained than my husband. I have more degrees than my husband, but I get paid less because mm-hmm. he's in private equity. So would that mean that I'm relegated to doing all the invisible work, to the shit share of mind, a task that I have to do forever, because I chose a job that I would argue is more valuable to society? Mm-hmm. That doesn't work. The other thing women said were, well, my job is more flexible. And then I started to realize that the studies showed me that if a woman was a doctor, and this is hetero cisgender studies, and a man was a professor, the woman would say her job is more flexible. If the woman was the professor and her husband was the doctor, she would say her job is more flexible, right? So flexibility is in the eye of the beholder. Right. And women often make their jobs more flexible, like I did. I left my job to become a case of the 1099, as I call it, mm-hmm. Because I wanted that flexibility, and I thought that was good for me. I'm telling you here, it's not always. You have to think about it long term. So women were saying to me, my husband gets paid more, and my job's more flexible. So I'm going to no. Then the next thing they said to me, well, I'm a better multitasker. That's the one we were talking about before. So this is the other day that changed my life. Besides the, should I do spreadsheet day and the blueberries day? It was when I sat down with this, because my job, I help my clients. I'm like the HBO show Succession Advisor. I help my clients with their family businesses and their family foundations. Mm-hmm. And so I get to access these amazing researchers because my clients fund them. So I called one of them up and I said, tell me everything about multitasking. There's no gender difference in how we multitask. It's never been found. There's nothing there in the science. But actually, he actually said to me, this one neuroscientist, that if you look closely, actually men probably are a little bit better multitaskers than women. But I would never say that, because then that would burst women's bubbles. Because but what he said to me that day was something that changed my life. And actually, I cried in his office, which was sort of embarrassing. But he said to me, when I said, are women better multitaskers? Are we wired differently for care? He said, well, imagine, Eve, that we men could convince you women that you're better at wiping asses and doing dishes. Like, how great for my career and my share of mind. Mm-hmm. So it's not really in my interest to tell you that you're not a better multitasker. Right. Because not only do I not have to convince you to do the shit work, so now you deny that you think you're better at it. Yeah. So I cried that day. And I will say that thank you for allowing me to unpack all this in 45 minutes when when this took me 8 years, now almost a decade of unpacking. So this is, I'd call this our 101. I'm happy to come back. We could do this at 201. But I think that was a very important day for me. The other unpacking was when women said to me, in the time it takes me to tell him, her, they what to do, I should just do it myself.
Yeah.
For that unpacking, I had to go to Dan Ariely. He's one of my favorite friends, and he's a behavioral economist, popular Wall Street Journal column, best-selling author.
Yep.
And what he said to me about that argument was exactly that's assuming women think their time is infinite, like you say. Because of course you want to teach someone how to wipe asses and do dishes with you early on. Otherwise, you're doing it forever, and that's discounting all of your share of mind in the future. And so I think the number one thing I will say is that we are not Albert Einstein. We can't fuck with the space-time continuum. There's actually no way to find time. But women have just a different amount of time choice over how we use our time. So when I say I'm a gender justice advocate, what I think I really am, and I've never said it this way, but I think I'm a time choice advocate. Yeah. I want women to have just as much time, choice over how they use their day as men do.
Yeah, right. So that's the mission. That's your mission, right?
That's my mission.
So your book, and what you've been focusing on and helping people with has gotten the notice of lots of other women, notable women. I know Reese Witherspoon and her company got involved. Can you talk about that association?
Yeah, that was really fun. Reese's husband, Jim, is a family friend of ours. My husband has known him since they were both in the mailroom together at CAA. And it's funny because she was actually one of the people who helped me with the spreadsheet. She would look at it and be like, "Oh my God, what is this that you're creating?" So she had been a very big supporter of this message and saying that for women to step into their full power, we want to invite men to step into their full power as well, right? It's just different spheres. And so what was interesting about her company, Hello Sunshine, was she started to think about how to center women in the middle of their own story, how to give women agency in their own story. And then one day I came to her saying, I've made cards and I'm starting a manuscript. And then she said, well, you should talk to Sarah Hardin. Sarah Hardin is the CEO of Hello Sunshine. And Sarah is a mom of 3. And she is in the thick of it along with me. And so Sarah said, let me play fair play. Let me be a beta tester for you. And see if it changes my life. And if it does, like you say it's going to, I want to go out to market with you, and you need to write this as a book. And Sarah is a fair player. She's a beta tester. It changed her life.
Wow.
And she's playing now, I think, for 3 years with me as a beta tester, because we now have over 1,000 people where we're getting data from. I mean, we have thousands and thousands who've read the book and who are playing, but we still have an active database where we're getting consistent data from over 1,000 couples, and it works.
Wow.
And I think that was the beauty. It was the beauty of Sarah coming back to me and saying, this is working for my household. It's not perfect. It's a practice, like you say, but it's changing the way my husband is looking at how he is responsible for the home. He's not asking me for a Hudson soccer bag. He is saying, I'm holding the estate planning card, Sarah. And that means, yes, I'll consult you in the planning, but I have this. And if something goes wrong with our will and it doesn't get done, it's on me.
Right.
And that was the big changes in her life, was around this idea of CPE, the conception, planning, and execution.
Yeah. So if women who are listening want to get involved and play, what should they do?
Well, I think that's a great question. Like I said to you before, it could feel daunting. But I will say is that you can listen to this podcast. You can read the book. You can look at Fair Play Life. We have our Instagram account. We have lots of fun, and fairplaylife.com. We have lots of fun tools. But I will say that part of it is just living in the consciousness that you have a right to be interested in your own life.
Yeah.
You have a right to what I call unicorn space. which is your uninterrupted attention for things that you love, regardless of whether it's paid. And I think that you have a right to be unavailable. And so I think part of it is staying with us in our community of women to say that we need you to believe that first. I need you to believe that your time is diamonds. Yeah. And once you are ready to believe that, because I've had 44 years of conditioning where society told me my time was sand and it was not valuable. If you are ready to believe that, then you can come with empowerment. You can come as a game changer to your relationship. Yeah. But I think the first step is not to, use the cards as a list and throw dishes on your partner and say, you have dishes now forever, because it doesn't work like that. It becomes a list. The first is entering a system. The first step is consciousness changing. Yeah. And that's why I love your work, Eliza, because this is it. Yeah. We're cultural warriors here. Yeah. We believe we deserve to have our time be diamonds. Yeah. So stay with us on the journey. This is a journey. We are here for each other. I'm here for you. You can always find me on DM. My team helps me answer DMs. But it is a practice. Yeah. I wish you can get fit by exercising once. Yeah. I wish you could change your marriage or your relationships in society by playing the card game once, but it doesn't work like that. This is a practice.
Well, and I love that you say that, because over the course of talking to women like you for the show, women who are doing really inspiring and interesting things, one of the themes that I'm hearing consistently is this idea of daily practice. That you have to, if you want to be more self-aware, it's a daily practice. Start journaling. Everyone every successful, inspiring woman we've talked to has talked about that. So can you talk a little bit about daily practices that you have, and maybe fair play is one of them, but can you talk about your daily practices?
The most important daily practice for me is communication. So what I used to think was a daily practice was things like meditation or journaling or even exercise. But once I realized that those were my secondary practices, but actually my long-term plan was to be a gender justice advocate, to write books, to be interested in my own life, to have extraordinary amount of unicorn space, which, like I said, is this uninterrupted attention for things that make you you. I realized that communication was my most important practice. And so what Seth and I do is we have a 10-minute a night check-in. 10 minutes a night where we set a timer. We often bring what Dan Ariely will call short-term reward substitution. So we'll bring like alcohol or cookie dough to our check-in. And that practice is something that came out of my, I used to tell my client, I still tell my clients to do it. It's easier said than done. Nobody in my data set, and I mean nobody, this was in the first 200 interviews with couples. And when I did this back, when I started in 2011, nobody in that first 200 told me that they did a daily check-in with their partner. Zero. Nobody does it. And so that was something that I knew was really important for my mediation practice. I tell people in business, it's so important to check in with your supervisor or the people you manage, but we don't do that. We don't prioritize. We use communication as a means to an end. Everybody said to me, it's a means to an end. Why do you communicate? People would look at me crazy. They'd say, I don't know, because I have to tell my son to get on his Zoom. I have to tell my husband to go get the blueberry, to go get the mustard. Once you start looking at communication as a practice, it's life-changing. Yeah. And when Seth and I sit there for 10 minutes, sometimes it's all about fair play, what we have to do the next day, or, Seth, I love you, but the kids almost burned their lunch down. So I need you tomorrow, to help me not feel like the fire alarm's going to go off. When you're talking when emotion is low and cognition is high, that's what we say as mediators. You want to talk when emotion is low and your cognition is high. That's what it does for me. So that's become my most important practice, that check-in. And ironically, Eliza, we notice when we don't do the check-in, just like some days when you don't exercise or journal, whatever you do for your practices, our days are shit shows the next day. And we actually like that because we realize, oh my God, what was wrong with this day? Why is everybody screaming? Why does nobody know who's getting them on their Zooms? Why is it a mess? we often notice it's because we forgot to check in the night before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's, it almost makes things seem a lot more purposeful, right? I mean, I think that's another element of it is, to one of the ways that we think of ourselves as being successful is having purpose. So, and if you don't approach your day in a purposeful way or have those check-in points like you're talking about, I mean, I love that. I have not really heard of anyone say that the daily practice for them is communication, although I think it makes an enormous amount of sense. It's just, it's so smart. Of course, you're so smart. I want to ask
you do for work too. If you don't have a partner and you're here and you're saying, okay, I don't have a partner yet, that is a very important piece for your workplace.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Judaism is something I think about a lot in terms of a analytical framework, because it's a gratitude religion. So it's very interesting. So I will say that the best advice I ever got actually was from the Talmud. It's not a perfect quote, but it's something I think about a lot. And the Talmud is one of our Jewish texts, our religious texts. And it's the piece around, not being obligated to finish the work. But that means just because you're not obligated to finish the work does not mean you're allowed to abandon it. And I live by that principle. I know I'm not going to finish this work. I know that, as I said before, $10.9 trillion of unpaid labor is done by women a year. I know that we still have a time discrepancy in how we value women and men's time. But just because I may not finish this work does not mean I'm going to abandon it.
Right. Well, it's a journey. It's not a destination, right? And that's just kind of another way of saying that. So what's next for you? So speaking of the journey for you, what is next? What's next in the journey?
Then I'm actually writing my second book right now. It's been really fun. It's a deep dive into what I didn't want to write about in book one, but I felt like I couldn't abandon it. It was the whole idea of this unicorn space, of this the interviews that over and over again, where so many powerful, amazing women told me that they lost their permission to be interesting and interested in their own lives. It was a very depressing thing to hear, but also very empowering, because I felt like, because I kept hearing it over and over again, it's not a you problem. It's a societal problem with milestones and how we value women, and we become very invisible after that first baby shower, right? So many women write about that, how great they felt in the OBGYN's office in their first baby shower, and they go home and no one ever calls them again to check in. And we're supposed to sort of raise our kids alone and not in a community and just suck it up, this and lose ourselves in the process. So I'm writing a book about that, about the intersection between creativity, identity, and happiness for women. And right now it's called either Unicorn Space or The Permission to Be Interesting. I'm not sure yet what we'll land on with the title, but it picks up on the themes of fair play.
Yeah.
And it's been really fun, Lisa, because I get to talk to women like you, people who've sort of recreated themselves, or who are doing things like Unicorn Space. For you, it's your beautiful mission and your podcast. And other women, it's their crocheting their Harry Potter dolls. For other women, it's becoming I talked to recently the first race car driver in this crazy continent-wide Grand Prix race. And she's one of the first women who ever placed, and she placed at 65 years old. So
wow.
Just amazing. I spoke to Sandy Zimmerman, who's the first mom to ring the bell in American Ninja Warrior. So it's been really fun.
I love that. And I love the idea of, permission to be interesting. It is, it is definitely, I think, a topic that a lot of women would gravitate towards. So I'm excited to hear more about it when it's ready. And
Thank you.
People want to find you. We're going to have links to your social, but what's the best way to connect with you if they want to kind of hear what's going on in your life and follow what you're doing?
I'd say my personal Instagram, because I get a little bit more political there and probably a little bit more angry. But for the fun things, it's Fair Play Life is the Instagram. But my personal Instagram is just Eve Rodsky. And so that's sort of more of my real stuff.
Well, Eve, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. I think that, women should go out and get Fair Play, and they should read it, and then they should follow and see the next step in that process and this journey that you're on. And thanks for allowing us a peek in.
I'm so happy to be here. And it's our first podcast of 2021. So happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah.